Okay, let's unpack this. When you hear the word romanticism, what's the first thing that, pops into your head?
Oh, for most people, it's probably love stories.
Right. Something involving a sweeping historical drama, a tragic romance, maybe a lot of rain and dramatic
For
sighs.
sure. And look, they were definitely good at traumatic romance, usually the disastrous kind.
But that common understanding totally misses the scale of what they were actually doing. It's so much bigger.
Does. It really does. And it reduces a fundamental cultural revolution to just a style choice.
Yeah.
Romanticism wasn't just a mood or some fashion trend. It was one of the most powerful, necessary cultural and artistic rebellions in Western history.
A
A
rebellion.
huge one. We're talking about a massive seismic cultural shift that just swept across Europe and really dominated British intellectual life from, say,
hmm
the late 1790s through the 1830s.
I think rebellion is the key word there, because if we strip away all the fancy poets, the dramatic paintings, and, the flowing language,
hmm
the core impulse of Romanticism was a resounding, passionate, and often very loud no thank you to the strict, boring logic of the century before it, and to the suffocating drudgery of early factory life.
Precisely. And our mission today is to give you the shortcut. We're going to quickly distill the core ideas that define this period.
Let's do it.
It was a movement that explicitly chose to celebrate these huge, overwhelming emotions. The wildest reaches of human imagination, the relentless pursuit of your own personal truth, and the undeniable, often magical power of nature.
And you need to understand not just what they wrote, but why they felt they had to abandon all the rules to write it.
Exactly. The why is everything.
So let's start there with the why, because you
Music.
don't get a movement this powerful, this explosive, without some serious historical friction. What exactly were these passionate rebels throwing shade at?
Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a direct reaction to two massive historical forces that were just fundamentally reshaping how people lived and thought.
Okay, so what's the first one?
The first source of that antagonism was intellectual. It was the preceding generation. The Enlightenment,
Ah, the Age of
the
Reason.
Age of Reason. The entire 1700s were dominated by this fierce, unwavering push for logic, for classical order, for science, and for these strict, perfectible rules.
Everything in its box.
Everything. The Enlightenment looked at the world impersonally. They viewed the entire universe, and by extension society, as a giant, perfectible machine.
Like a clock.
A clockwork mechanism, exactly. Something that could be taken apart, understood, and rigidly controlled.
They felt like this approach was cold, right? It was limiting. It reduced human experience to a series of, logical equations?
Yes, and in doing so, it stripped the soul, the mystery, and the feeling out of everything that makes life, interesting. They saw this obsession with measurement and control as dangerous.
Okay, so that's the intellectual friction.
Right. But then that purely intellectual friction met a dirty, loud, incredibly real-world friction.
And here comes the second force, the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution.
In the early 1800s, this wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a reality. Suddenly, you had the spread of centralized factories, the smoke filling up cities, rapid urbanization.
A hyper-focus on commerce, on efficiency, on just making money.
Life became less about human connection or spiritual depth and more about productivity and the bottom line.
So the Romantics were trapped. They're caught between an intellectual movement telling them to suppress their feelings for cold reason and a physical reality telling them to trade their lives for factory wages and smog.
They had no choice but to reject the whole system.
And what did they choose instead?
They chose a radical alternative. If the world was going to be defined by facts and machines and polluted cities, they chose passion and feelings.
Yeah.
They championed the remote, untamed forest over the factory floor.
And they chose freedom.
Freedom, even instability over rigid control. And you have to remember, they were fueled by the incredible real-world energy coming out of the recent American and French revolutions. This idea that you could literally smash the old order and build something entirely new based on ideals.
That sets the stage perfectly. They made a foundational choice. Passion over facts, freedom over control. So, if you are going to reject logic and machines, what do you embrace instead? This is where their framework gets incredibly useful, because they defined a whole new way of seeing the world.
They really did. They established 6 core features that are like the bedrock of the Romantic worldview.
And these 6 ideas are simple to grasp, but for their time, they were truly radical in their implications.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the one that basically defines the whole movement, feelings over logic.
The big one.
And this isn't just saying, oh, I feel sad today. It's much deeper. This is prioritizing the internal subjective experience above externally verifiable scientific truth.
It means following your heart, your intuition, even if it defies mathematical reason. We see this beautifully illustrated by William Wordsworth. His work, like lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey, it's not about describing the scientific properties of the river. He describes how merely observing a landscape, a specific piece of nature, brings him this profound, deep calm and spiritual healing.
So the value isn't in the observation itself.
No, but in the internal emotional response it causes. That response is the truth.
I see how that leads directly to their second core idea, which is that nature is powerful and holy. It wasn't just pretty scenery to them.
Not at all. It was alive, possibly even divine. Nature held a moral and spiritual authority that they felt civilization had lost. So hurting nature, or trying to conquer it, was seen as this profound violation.
A sin, almost.
Almost. And the consequences of that violation are the entire premise of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's epic, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
That's the classic story where the sailor shoots the albatross.
Precisely. And the killing of the albatross, which is just a seabird, is this senseless act that triggers a devastating supernatural curse that afflicts the sailor and his entire crew.
So nature fights back.
It shows that nature has this immense retributive power. It will respond if you disrespect it or if you violate it through, unthinking or cruel actions.
That deep sense of mystery and cosmic payback bleeds right into their third feature, their appreciation for dreams and spooky stuff.
Oh, for sure. They fully embrace the supernatural, visions, folklore, the darker side of human psychology.
They understood that the universe wasn't just a neat clockwork machine.
No, it was vast, mysterious, and potentially terrifying. This is the birthplace of the Gothic sensibility. And Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the perfect example here.
A classic horror story.
It's a scary novel, full of mystery, yes. But at its heart, it functions as this profound, terrifying warning, a very early warning, about what happens when scientific ambition and unchecked logic are pursued without any emotional or moral context.
You get a monster.
You get a monster.
That makes perfect sense. They saw the danger of a purely scientific world and injected the soul back into it through mystery and fear. Okay, so if we shift focus from the spooky external world to the internal world, we hit the fourth idea. The massive focus on me.
The isolated individual. The unique genius. Often the misunderstood rebel.
The hero.
The romantic hero is fundamentally anti-establishment, against a society built on conformity and tradition and these rigid class structures. They insisted on the primacy of the individual experience. Think about Lord Byron.
He was basically the rock star of his generation.
He was, and he epitomized this focus. His poetic voice was constantly focused on these lonely, fiery heroes who were completely uninterested in rules or tradition.
But wait, doesn't that make them just self-obsessed? I mean, in time of massive social change, is the isolated genius truly a revolutionary figure or just a deeply selfish one?
That's a great question, and it reflects the tension that's right there in Romanticism. For them, being a rebel, being self-obsessed in that way, was the only authentic path. It was a rejection of the conformity that the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution demanded. To be truly unique, to pursue your own passions and artistic vision, that was inherently a political act against a system that wanted everyone to be identical cogs in the machine.
I could see that. That leads us to the fifth idea, which feels almost contradictory to the lone genius. The embrace of kids as innocent.
It's not contradictory, it's connected. They believed children possessed an innate, pure truth. A natural vision that adults inevitably lost the moment they were assimilated into society or the church or the factory system.
So innocence is the ideal state.
Yes, and William Blake captures this perfectly.
Yeah.
He often contrasted the uncorrupted imagination and wonder of children in his Songs of Innocence with the societal corruption and oppression he saw everywhere around him. The child's vision was the true vision, not the adult's calculated reason.
So if innocence is the ideal, then the adult world is something to be resisted at all costs. Which brings us to the final unifying feature, which really summarized their life choices. Breaking rules.
Living freely and without constraint.
And this wasn't just a theme in their poems.
Oh no. They lived this rebellion, often scandalously. Consider Percy Bysshe Shelley. He wasn't some armchair theorist. He was actually kicked out of Oxford for publishing a pamphlet attacking organized religion.
Wow.
Their art and their lives were completely intertwined. And that dedication to living freely, even when it meant social and economic disaster, that defined the movement.
It's amazing to see how these 6 ideas, feelings, nature, ghosts, me, kids, and freedom, they covered every aspect of life. It's a completely alternative manifesto to the age of reason.
It really is.
But, articulating a philosophy is one thing. How did they actually translate these radical, overflowing ideas into physical art? What literary forms did they invent or champion to hold all this emotional intensity?
That's our shift into the writer's toolkit. And you're right, they couldn't use the rigid, highly structured classical forms favored by the Enlightenment. They needed new structures that could handle spontaneity, intense emotional overflow, and the subjective self.
So they relied heavily on lyric poetry, for one.
The lyric poem is essentially a short, powerful, I feel this right now piece. It's perfect for capturing an immediate personal surge of emotion, which was their artistic priority.
An example.
The quintessential example is Wordsworth's I wandered lonely as a cloud, where the entire focus is the immediate personal happiness found just in the vision of a field of daffodils. It's instantaneous, personal, and profoundly emotional.
Then you have the odes, which feel much grander.
Odes are deeper, more expansive poems where the writer engages in serious, reflective thought, often about life's great themes, or sometimes just a specific object that triggers that massive reflection.
Like what?
John Keats was a master here. He could take something as fleeting as a bird's song in Ode to a Nightingale, or the cold, silent permanence of a statue in Ode on a Grecian urn, and use it as a launch pad for this profound philosophical and emotional exploration.
And for longer narrative storytelling, they often used ballads.
Yes, they favored ballads because they were simple story poems, often with straightforward rhymes, which made them accessible. They felt less academic than classical epics, and were perfect for capturing folklore, dramatic narratives, and those elements of mystery we talked about.
So the rhyme of the ancient mariner again.
It's the blueprint for the romantic ballad, that sweeping supernatural story poem.
And their work in fiction, of course, went to the darkest corners with the Gothic novels.
These are your scary, moody books emphasizing mystery, overwhelming emotion, and the supernatural. Frankenstein fits here perfectly. The Gothic form offered them the structure they needed to house their fascination with emotional depths, the terrifying consequences of ambition, and the vast unknown forces of the world.
But my favorite form, the one that perfectly reflects their embrace of the messy, passionate creative process over the polished, logical result, has to be the fragments.
Ah, the fragment. These were often dreamy, unfinished pieces that felt closer to a vision captured mid-flight than a structured academic argument. They prioritized the raw, authentic burst of creativity.
And the supreme example is Coleridge's famous, often quoted, and entirely incomplete Kubla Khan.
It is.
It's fascinating because the background of Kubla Khan itself feels so intensely romantic. He wrote it down after waking from an opium-induced dream and was famously interrupted while writing, so he could never fully recapture the vision.
Exactly. The story of the poem's creation is as important as the poem itself. It represents the romantic prioritization of visionary truth over formal structure. They felt that if the muse interrupted you, you captured the piece as it was, because the truth of the dream was more important than the discipline of the final draft.
What's remarkable is how intentional they were about making art that felt immediate, personal, and true to the self. If you wanted to sum up the massive philosophical gulf between the two worldviews, Enlightenment versus Romanticism, you can look at the perspectives they adopted.
It truly boils down to this fundamental choice of perspective. The Enlightenment saw the universe like a machine, designed, logical, rational, operating like perfect clockwork.
And the Romantics.
The Romantic saw the universe full of mystery, alive, unpredictable, and imbued with overwhelming, often frightening power.
It's the difference between cold, clinical observation and passionate, terrifying engagement.
And if we zoom out, the single key takeaway is how radical Romanticism truly was. It didn't just tweak the previous movement, it fundamentally rejected the Enlightenment's relentless push for pure clinical logic.
You replaced it.
It replaced that external reliance on reason with a profound faith in internal truth and the overwhelming external power of nature. They put feeling and soul back into the center of the world.
And the reason this dive matters so much is that we are absolutely still fighting these battles today. That tension never settled. The conflict between science and intuition, between industry and the natural world.
Between conforming to the system and being the isolated, unique individual.
That tension just evolved into new forms.
Indeed. It gives you something to think about. The Romantics, particularly through works like Frankenstein, clearly warned us about the potential dangers of unchecked logic and scientific ambition when it's totally divorced from any emotional or spiritual context.
They ask us to consider what happens when reason is king and feeling is exiled.
So take a moment and consider, where do you see that exact tension between cold, calculating reason and powerful, potentially dangerous feeling playing out most prominently in the world you inhabit right now?
Is it in how we discuss technology? Is it in how we treat the environment? That romantic push for feeling against the machine is still demanding an answer.